On today's episode, we introduce ourselves and explain where the title Unexamined Me was created. I am super excited, Stephanie. This is episode 1.
Yeah, I am too. I'm also nervous, but it's good. It's good.
It is good. I think it's going to be good.
Welcome to Unexamined Me, where social justice meets spirituality. We're your hosts, Stephanie Bowman,
Nicole Andrews,
and Julie Brock. Together, we examine our holistic identity to uncover what's not working in order to address and change behaviors and mindsets.
we invite you to join us as we move from an unexamined life to an activated, holistic life dedicated to social justice and well-being.
Y'all, this has been years in the making. We just didn't know it.
Yeah. And then it happened. And now we're just riding the wave.
We are. So we're super excited to be here today. Like I said, my name is Julie Brock. We're going to spend today just talking a little bit about ourselves, and how Unexamined Me came to be, and, places that you can join our community, because we're really excited for you to be here. So a little bit about me. Gosh, where do I start? I have a very sordid history. Just kidding. I was born in a small town in Oregon. Okay, just kidding. Most of my career, I guess, you would say, is really working with people to help identify where they are and where they want to go. So I've done that in a lot of different settings. I was a English teacher, high school English teacher for 16 years. I've worked in workforce development. I've worked in higher ed. And now I own Julie Brock Consulting and a collaboration with Stephanie called Grafted Roots. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Woo woo. But most of my work is really around this idea of human development. How do we become the human that we want to be? We're one of the only sentient beings on this planet that has to be taught how to human. Like dogs know how to dog. Giraffes know how to giraffe. But humans, there's a lot of choices for us. And so that's really, my master's is in human development. A lot of my post-secondary certification is around this idea of how do we human, what are the parts of humaning, and how can we do that in a way that is true and honoring to who we are? Stephanie, did I miss anything?
A bunch, but that's probably why we're here, is because we need to unexamine it.
Oh, good point. I think it's enough for now. I mean,
Yes.
or it's just like me monologuing.
No.
Okay, you go.
Okay.
You go.
Yeah. I'll introduce myself again. My name is Stephanie Bowman. I use she, her pronouns. I am a multicultural, multi-ethnic, cisgender woman who, is going through the world feeling like I belong everywhere and I belong nowhere. Like I really hated the question, "Where are you from?" Because place really wasn't, or home isn't a place for me. It's more of an idea, a feeling. And so that's kind of like the lens I go through. But through that, I was able to understand that the reason like a specific location isn't home for me is because I'm a community builder at heart. And so I can build my home wherever. And that's really one of the reasons why I think this collab between Julie and I is so exciting, because Julie helps people learn about themselves and see themselves and build themselves. And then I have this ability to build community. And what we're really excited to do in this podcast is be able to work through both of those lenses. At heart, I'm a social justice activator. I'm an activist. I am an advocate. I believe that all of the work that I've done really has been focused around education, but every time I look at education, I see it as a way for self-liberation. And yet it's not built that way. And so I feel like I'm in consistent struggle with the work that I've been doing. And I mean, but that's in a way, I think that's why I've gotten too many degrees, so many degrees in education, is because I'm secretly trying to figure out how to destroy it from like the inside. Um, but yeah, what else?
So, yeah, well, maybe we should tell people where we met. So,
Sure.
um, Stephanie and I both met at a higher ed institution where she runs the student service side and support services for College of Education students. And I was the data wonk on the other side of the office. And we just started having all these wonderful conversations. And it was interesting because Stephanie is trying to dismantle education from the inside out. And I got out of education so I could also dismantle it, but from the outside in. And again, I think that that's what makes this collaborative so phenomenal, is because there's such an intrigue in the right question. And that's one of the things that I think that both you and I bring, is that nothing is finite and nothing
Right.
can't be examined. And when we leave things unexamined, then they become stale and obsolete. And so I think it's important for us to start to pick up all of the different rocks and look at them from all the different sides. And I think that that's what we both do with like the wonder and curiosity of a 3-year-old, but with the cynicism of people who have lived life.
Yes. No, I mean, yeah, I think that's like right on point though, is we're not afraid of being like, what's that?
Right.
What's this
What do you
do?
mean by that? Yeah,
What if I push
exactly.
this button?
Yeah,
Like there is that, I think it's it's a curiosity, not for curiosity's sake, but for understanding and for development and growth, right? Like
absolutely.
we're not just picking up the rock because it's in front of us and we got to pick it up, but we notice that the rock is maybe different than the other rocks or out of place, or does, it's like one of these doesn't belong. And so instead of just moving forward, we're like, hey, what's going on with that rock? And instead of being
Right.
like, let me just move it over to the rest of the rocks, or let me hide it so that it looks aesthetically pleasing, we ask a lot of like this. Like we're literally creating an example of this rock that does not exist and showing you what happens in our brains.
Absolutely. Which is good, because you got to get to know us to see if you want to come back. And we really hope that you do, because we think that this concept of social justice and individual growth is really something that's fantastic and fascinating. And we can't stop talking about it. So then we're like, well, if we're going to keep talking about it, maybe we invite other people to the conversation. And we really are hoping for this to be a global conversation, because if you've been examining rocks lately, there's a lot out there. And it can become super overwhelming, especially if you pick all of them up and put them all in your pockets. And so we hope that through joining our community and thinking through, like, what is your rock to pick up and in what order? Are there other
Right.
rocks that you need to examine first, to polish up, to let go, to release, to throw back into the water, so that you can really focus on the rock that matters to you and your community the most? Okay, we might have like squeezed every bit out of this metaphor, Stephanie. Maybe we should move on to our lenses.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, like, as Julie's saying, like part of all of that though is like how we see the world, and the lens we carry through how we see the world. I mean, I talked a little bit about um my identities, but so I live in the United States. I live in the Midwest. That's definitely multi-layered already as it is in terms of lenses I see the world. I'm also a multi-ethnic person. And so that awards me different ways of seeing the world. Being bilingual, language creates a multiple multiple lenses. Being an immigrant to the United States, I think is also an added gift of a lens to look into it. I'm a scholar. I have my doctorate in higher education. Those were a lot of lenses that I added to it. I'm a mother to 2 kids. That has brought up a whole entire perspective. I'm a caregiver. I have 3 dogs at home. I'm a gardener. I pick up a lot because I'm interested in a lot, but I see how all of these things interconnect. So then that comes through how I view the world is through a critical lens. So I'm a critical theorist, which means that I'm always looking at where's the difference, and then how do I learn more about that story. So really looking at, let's say we're at 99% success rate somewhere. I'm like, wonderful. So what's that 1%? Let's look at that. Let's ask questions. Let's see why that is. Because just because we have majority doesn't mean we have all. And I think my lens of viewing the world is we need all to feel part of the community to really be a community. Julie, can
So
you take
good.
us into your mind?
Oh, that's a scary, scary place to be. So, so I identify as a white I guess midlife. I don't know, not midlife crisis by any means, but I'm a 50-year-old white woman who grew up in the US on the West Coast, transplanted to the Midwest, um, have traveled quite a bit, and that has and lived in different places. And so that definitely has flipped my lens a little bit. And what I find so fascinating is when I travel, I like to travel to unexamined places. I like to go to hovels. I like to go to small villages. I like to be in places where I can get the heartbeat and I can understand the culture of the life there. I have a partner that we've been married for 25 years, cis white woman, she, her pronouns. Like I've, I'm, I am US, right? Like I am the United States and I am white, through and through. And I think what is interesting about that is that I grew up in Oregon, that is one of the most racist states, number 49 in the continental United States. Never knew, didn't know until I left that we were a racist place. So I think when I travel, when I think about finding the way in which people live in these different cultures, what is so fascinating to me is that when we boil it all down, people want to be loved. People want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
People want to be cared for and want to care for others. And those things can look different, but the basic concept of love is kind of the grounding source of that. And so then I get really curious about, well, what does that look like? How has that been interpreted through the layers of life that we've lived? Where is it working well for us? Where is it not? How could somebody's idea of love get perverted or twisted and therefore passed down in a way that isn't healthy or no longer relevant for generations that come? And on the flip side, how does a healthy concept of love get passed down, right? Like I'm fascinated and I question where we pick up the pieces that make us ourselves. How do we build identity? Because that's another thing that I think humaning, we haven't really spent a lot of time in talking about is we don't have a class on humaning. Okay. K through graduate degree. There's really no class on humaning unless you are going for a degree or some sort of certification that studies that.
Right.
But it's something that is so basic that everyone needs so
Yeah.
that we can understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm coming back up from the deep.
But I think though that leads us then into like, one of the big questions that got us into the podcast was where's the block? Like, I mean, I follow a lot of accounts on social media, and I see all the tragedy happening in the world, and I see like brown moms mourning their infants lost, their children's lost, their just loss in general. And I'm sitting here bawling, and I'm just like, where is the world? What has happened? Why can't we feel um yeah, where is the block? And like it's gonna be one of the big questions throughout the whole entire show. It's like, where is the block?
Right. Right. And that I think is so fascinating too is Brene Brown wrote The Atlas to the Heart, which is an entire reference book on feelings.
Mm.
And again, do we learn what feelings are for, or
Right.
are we told to suppress that feeling because it makes somebody else uncomfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
where does that start and why does that start? And I think that sense of compassion and empathy, those are concepts that I think are built on strong foundations of healthy understanding of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who grew up in a very stoic family of Germans and Danes, expressing emotion that wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a lot of unlearning to be able to relearn what emotion is and how to process it. And then you have kids. I had two children who are now 21 and 18, very large people in both personality and height. But I had to learn to follow their emotions. I had to learn how to listen
Mm-hmm.
and listen to what their needs are, because their needs aren't my needs. Their needs are
Mm-hmm.
their needs. And how do we do that, not just for our children, but for our communities? How do we do that in ways that are honoring of the individuals? And I think one of the ways forward is what you've already said, Stephanie, is it's about understanding. It doesn't have to be full agreement. It's about understanding.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, really with what you were saying too explains the like, how do we combine, or how are we choosing to combine social justice, activism, and spirituality together? And I think it's through that, right? Like through understanding that, hey, my cultural background, we are very expressive. When we're mad, we're mad, and you will know that. And when we're happy, we're happy. And when all of the emotions are not only verbally expressed, but they're shown in the way we move our bodies and in the way that our facial expressions. So being a very expressive person, I think that's why I just culturally, I'm like, show me something. Show me something physically, say something, do something. And being in the Midwest, being particularly around a lot of white folks whose culture is not to be that way, it is jarring. And at the same time, there's no right and wrong way to feel. But as you're saying, like, is there a block though?
Right.
And maybe were we taught something that was helpful at some point generationally, but no longer helpful. And then how do we unexamine that without feeling like we're, you know, betraying who we were, or who, like, all of these big questions, while thanking previous us, but being able to move forward in a different way.
Yeah, we got to Marie Kondo this stuff up,
Oh my gosh, I love Marie Kondo.
right? And I love how she's like, what, you don't need this sweatshirt anymore? Give it a hug. Say thank
it.
you. Thank you so much for serving me so well. And then you release it. I feel like that's what we need to do in our lives all the time.
All the time. But it's
All the
hard
time.
work because it's like, does this bring me joy? No. So then you got to let go and you're like, oh, no, but what if, like,
Right.
yeah, it's scary.
I know. It is scary. And it's scary also when you start to realize that people save things that you would never save. Yeah. Like socks with holes in them. But they're my favorites. And I'm like, no, we can get you a new favorite pair of socks.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, all right. So we've talked about how the unexamined me is definitely going to get examined
Yes.
every episode.
Mm-hmm.
So who are we inviting along on this journey? Because, if you're for everyone, you're for no one.
Yeah,
Who are we for,
absolutely.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, so I think for sure we want to work with and through generational cycle breakers. And so also not only like who, right, but we want to help identify, because a big thing, and you can correct me, Julie, if you don't agree, but I feel like we both understand that language matters, and we need to ensure that we're understanding what words mean in the same way so we can move through the conversation. Otherwise, if we think a word means different things, we'll never be on the same page. So I'm just going to define a generational cycle breaker in terms of kind of how Julie and I see it. If you see it a different way, that's wonderful. So it's someone who can identify some sort of pattern in their generational story, whether it's their story, their mom's story, their grandma's story, their great grandma's story. But somehow you understand that there's generational cycle happening. And in order to break that generational story, you have to exit. And there's different theories and strategies in which we're going to talk about ways to exit. But regardless, when you exit, you've created a puncture in that cycle. You've created a rip, a tear. And so a generational cycle breaker is really working to heal that puncture wound in order to move towards creating something that is more whole for the next generation to come.
Yeah, a great example of that is in our family. We have generational mental illness on both sides of our family. And so we knew as soon as we brought children into this world, that would be the cycle breaker that we would focus on, because we knew statistically it was pretty assured that both of our kids would have something to do with some mental struggling with mental wellness. And so we right away got our kids into therapy. It just became like you go and get your physical, and then just like you go get your body checked out, you go get your head checked out. And we normalized this idea of mental health and well-being, so much so that older people in my family, then they would ask questions like, well, what does anxiety feel like? What does that look like? And when I would describe it, they're like, oh, I think I might have some of that. Like, you might. Here are some resources for you. So, inviting people along on that conversation, because then they also get some healing and they get some help along the way too, if they so choose. But for us, the cycle that we really wanted to break was mental well-being, really normalizing that conversation. And I think that leads us to our next audience member is this holistic seekers. So yes, I am in full agreement, Stephanie, language matters. I mean, we can look at words 720 different angles, upside down and sideways, and they will mean something different if we don't define it. So when we think about holistic seekers, we're thinking about people who understand that healing happens in multi-dimensional ways. So you'll hear us talk about the big I later. And we are beings that have mental well-being, spiritual well-being, physical well-being. Our experiences, our emotions, our energy, those all affect the well-being of our big I, our identity. And so holistic seekers, they follow the root of that hurt past the symptoms. So for example, I was really struggling with a physical exercise routine. And I kept trying to berate myself into getting on the treadmill. And when I started following the route, I realized that it wasn't a physical well-being at play. It was a spiritual well-being at play. And I had to honor that hurt, right? And really see where it was rooted in, treat that wound with honor and grace, and to move towards something more whole, right? And I think sometimes we're taught in Western culture to muscle through it. And I think sometimes then we continue to treat symptoms versus actually following the root.
Yeah, maybe I got to do that too, because just even dread the idea of physical activity.
It doesn't help that we're in the Midwest in winter.
I know. Just like looking outside, I'm like, oh, I feel like these plants. I've gone into hibernation.
Exactly. All right, we have a third audience. You want to take this one? This is your baby.
Yeah, absolutely. So a third audience here are community builders. So they are folks that understand that there are societal cycles to break. So, as I was talking about that critical lens theory that I look at the world, that's understanding that, yes, I have to break that cycle within myself, but also there are societal oppressions that are holding us back collectively, both those who are privileged and oppressed in those cycles. And there are also folks who understand that we have to heal ourselves in order to heal the collective. Because if we want to move forward and create something different and something whole, we need all of us to get through. So I think that's what we were talking about, just that, if you think about, okay, so I'm not a meteorologist, but this is about as much as I know about tornadoes. So if you think about like a tornado and a storm, in the most basic form, it picks up because it picks up mass and speed, and therefore creates more energy. So if we all start exiting that cycle, that, whether that be white supremacy, we all start removing ourselves from feeding white supremacy, then white supremacy in itself gets weaker. So community builders say, all right, I have exited. I see white supremacy. I can identify it. I know what it feels like, what it looks like, all of that. And now I'm going to reach out and grab someone's hand so they can also break out of that cycle, because together, collectively, we're going to build something different, something that isn't oppressive. And really, that's kind of what we're hoping to learn and grow from you all as well in the community is, Julie and I here are extending our hand saying, hey, let's build something different. And whoever wants to join us for that, we would love to have you and learn from you too, so that we can all escape all of these oppressive cycles in order to build something better.
Yeah. And we want it to be global, man. We are not small thinkers. We really think that what we are building And Unexamined Me is one part of that. It's one part of a bigger movement that we have called Grafted Roots, and really thinking about how we can serve as both a resource as well as a catalyst for positive global change. We want to help facilitate that conversation that transforms individuals and communities so that people are active participants in the fight for a more just and equitable world for everyone, right? Because like I said, like when you go into community, first off, it's a privilege if you are invited into somebody else's community to be able to see that expression of community, that expression of love that is different than my own. And what is so cool is that we learn more, and we have understanding and we have compassion, so that when tragedy happens across the world, there is a collective holding space, holding hope for those who cannot hold it themselves. And that, I think, is one of the things that we're really looking to activate. And when we say activate, we mean action. This isn't about thoughts and prayers.
No.
This isn't about turning, well, not in my backyard, right? This isn't about any of that. This is about true connection and understanding that you are built for something.
Yep.
You're not built for everything. You're built for something. So how can you identify what that something is? And how do you bring your best self forward to join that community also working on that?
Yeah. Ugh, love it.
Same. Ugh. Okay, so we're just at the beginning, friends. We hope that that you stay with us. Give us a few episodes, keep with us. We would love to have you join us next time. We're going to unpack what we mean when we say the big I, when we talk about all those parts of identity. And we also would love that wherever you're listening to this, please click and subscribe. Check out our Instagram at Grafted Roots MN. Please join our community at graftedroots.net. And if you have a suggestion or a thought that you would like us to cover, please email us at graftedrootsmn@gmail.com.
Yes, we would love to hear from you. Okay, until next time. Bye.
Until next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to Unexamined Me, the podcast of the Grafted Roots community. Music for Unexamined Me was produced by Ross Walgren of Effective FX. Find him at effective-fx.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who needs to hear this message. It really does help us grow.